Elin, I think this is for you. May, would you like to? Should I have entered politics in the first place?
Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another episode of Help Desk. I'm your host Drew, and today we have Dr. Chee Soon Juan, the Sec Gen of the SDP, on our episode to talk about GE 2025, obviously. We also took some time to reflect on his career as a politician so far and to answer your questions on a toxic ex, if you can imagine that, Dr. Chee speaking about that. I won't keep you guys on the episode any longer because it is a pretty long episode, so I'll dial it up. Dr. Chee, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
For taking time out of your campaign. You know, I was looking back a little bit. You definitely would have noticed, but actually 6 years ago when I first started at Mothership, in the very first week of my job, I attended SDP's campaign launch before the 2020 election.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. And what I remember very clearly from that event was you guys had to switch the venue at the last minute. You were supposed to have it in like a venue that was run by a church or something like that.
Yes.
And then you had to change it last minute to Mandarin.
Yeah, that was our campaign launch.
Yes,
and at that time, we just booked this place, and months ahead of time. So we went down to this place, and I said, hey, look, I don't want to, have any problems later on. Just let me know if, you're able to rent it to us. And he said, okay, no problem. And then just literally the day before the event, the MCST called up and said, hey, look, we have to cancel the event. We're not going to go with it. But I said, what about all the agreements that we signed? Don't worry. And that was, but sadly, that's not the first time that we've experienced it.
Okay, yeah. I was looking back at the headline that I wrote. It was 26 hours before your event.
So it was terrible, and it's happened repeatedly.
Yeah.
And that is the problem here as far as, political opposition is concerned. We're always holding the short end of the stick.
Yeah. Afterwards, I was just looking at the follow-up articles that I wrote on that same issue. You ended up meeting the pastor. It seemed like you guys had a nice chat, and there was some sort of misunderstanding.
Yeah, they apologized for it, and we managed to find. Back then it was the Mandarin Hotel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's changed hands. But we managed to get everything on track again. So, but it was a pretty bad scare.
Yeah. 6 years ago, but now we're in 2025.
Yeah.
How's the campaign going for you so far?
Time flies when you're having fun, or not. So, we've had a good interim period where we continue to build ourselves as far as our policies are concerned, just getting ready for this particular GE. You've always got to have a longer runway because of, particularly, as I said, in the political situation right now. We've always got to try to get a head start, and then just so that we won't have to play catch up when Parliament's dissolved, and then when nomination comes.
A relatively short period of time compared to the rest of the world.
We've got to cram things together and just make sure that, things go smoothly during the 9 days of campaigning.
Yeah, we're recording this about the halfway point-ish of the campaign period,
Almost,
right?
yes.
Yeah. How do you feel it's been going so far?
It's been, something that we've been wanting to make sure that we maintain our message discipline and put everything on track. But sometimes you just cannot control the narrative because, your opponent whether it strikes their fancy or not, wants to take it in a different direction. And of course, I'm referring to Mr. Ong Ye Kung and Ms. Po Li San's stance on wanting to focus on the fact that, I had, in their words, abandoned Bukit Batok. So I just found that rather befuddling in terms of why they would want to, go on that track, because it doesn't quite suit their own message.
Yeah. In what way? What do you mean by that?
Everybody in Singapore knows gerrymandering here. And I thought that they would have wanted to avoid that situation rather than wanting to talk about it. But hey, as I said, they're welcome, happy to have this conversation with them.
Yeah.
But yesterday we made the point, and I as I said, after the shellacking that Ong Ye Kung got online, I think, he feels that he needs to pivot back right now into talking about issues that Singaporeans are very concerned about. And I I would encourage him to do that.
Yeah. Can we speak about your move to Sembawang West for a little bit? Why did you decide on Sembawang West SMC?
Yeah, but, we've traditionally campaigned big in the Woodlands area, and I think it goes back to I think 2000s where we ran over there. And so we've traditionally been, very in terms of our grassroots support and campaigning. And then in 2022, we had said that we were going to campaign in this next GE. We were going to come back to Sembawang.
Okay.
And Ong Yu Kung had actually acknowledged that. And so I don't think it was a surprise to him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I don't know what happened in between, but Sembawang West then got carved out. And because of that, we just wanted to make sure of our grassroots campaigning. We've been there for a long time.
Yeah.
So we just made the very natural migration to Sembawang. And then, of course, with Sembawang West now becoming an SMC, we just thought that we just come there and I'll just want to anchor the northern strategy, as we call it.
Did you consider at all staying in Bukit Batok and competing in, what is now Jurong East Bukit Batok?
Yeah,
GRC?
I mean, look, it's in the context of Singapore's politics, you've got to understand that, in between when they dissolved the parliament, announced the boundaries, and when the Prime Minister dissolves Parliament, you're talking about weeks, literally weeks. And, to go into a single member constituency, you look at the sheer size of the voters that they've got to reach out to. That's already an uphill battle.
Yeah.
But when you have to multiply that 4 or 5 times in terms of, a GRC, you begin to know strategically where you stand. So as far as I'm concerned, I know Bukit Batok like the back of my hand.
Yeah.
But then you have to start having to campaign in Hong Kong North, which now become part of the GRC, and then you've got to go down south to Clementi area, parts of Jurong, and even in the some of the Gombak areas.
Yeah.
It really makes it very difficult to reach out to voters, especially as I said, in light of the fact that we have all of 30 days to campaign, and this is where that problem lies. But if we had known, say, 3-6 months before, it would still be possible for doing that. So I just keep coming back to this whole idea that the entire playing field is just tilted towards the PAP, and you can understand why.
Yeah. So Sembawang West versus Bukit Batok, is there a different vibe to the place? I mean, how are you finding the place compared to your old, I don't know if you call it stomping ground, but I guess the place that you have previously campaigned in twice.
I was pleasantly surprised. I'm also because maybe the news was just, people were watching and then they kind of figured that, and I had been getting a lot of this feedback saying, hey, look, before the boundaries were announced, they were saying Bukit Batok is not going to be that. You know that, right? And maybe it was hoping against hope. Just trying to put on my mind. I said, well, maybe it might not happen, So the wishful thinking part in me. Then, sure enough, when it did.
Where were you when you found out the news?
I was at home in front of my computer and I just gotten a call 2:00 and it says, hey, news is that the EBRC is going to release its report, and Parliament is going to sit, right, 3:00.
Yeah.
So it says, okay, let's just wait for it. And sure enough, at 3:00, went straight to the list in there. My eyes went down to Bukit Batok and I couldn't find it. And then but was half expecting it.
What did you say? Did you curse? Did you?
Just that you to bleat out all the expletives because put up. But it was, I mean, in the context of that I was working there for 9 years, and you don't go in, spend your invest your time and put your heart and soul into it. And we were there. We rented an office space in one of the blocks in there, and we were organizing activities on weekends, with the elderly and during school holidays, enrichment programs for children and so on. And it wasn't easy. And I said that in the campaign rally last night that I know each and every block, every coffee shop, every basketball court. And, you know, you even got down to when residents will come up to me and says, hey, look, you know, we see this, it's quite dangerous, you know, security matters. And there was things like, for example, your electrical outlet on lamp posts, and it was right next to a playground. You know, the cover had rusted off already, and the wires were all exposed. So we went down, we saw it, took a picture, and it's all, you know, I put it up, posted it on Facebook, and we told the MP, Mr. Morali, they say, you might want to take care of this. It's very dangerous. So it went down to that level, you know. And you don't do this for 9 years and then see it all taken away from you without feeling anything, feeling very, very, it's like a real punch in the gut now.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you have to catch reality. There's only so much wallowing you can do. And then because you know that once that boundary is announced, the boundaries are announced, the clock starts ticking. And given the situation, I knew that Mr. Lawrence Wong, PM, was not going to give us a lot of lead time. For him, it was all calculated, all planned already, right? Announce the boundaries at a certain time. Don't give them too much time to start campaigning if it's a new, all the new boundaries. And then call for the elections. And sure enough, I think it was, if I remember correctly, it's about 35 days. And you just really don't have to very much time. So I had to quickly gather myself again and pivot and decide on where you want to go. And ended up at deciding strategic reasons Sembawang West would be the best place for me to campaign in these elections.
Do you feel like the issues that you're encountering, I mean, that the residents are bringing up to you in Sembawang West, do they differ from the issues that residents in Bukit Batok were talking to you about?
No. In that sense, the issues are applicable from constituency to constituency. Unlike, say, maybe we're talking about District 9, Bukit Timah area. People may not be as concerned with cost of living.
Yeah.
But apart from that, the majority of Singaporeans are very concerned about it. Job security, unemployment problems right now with the fresh graduate and so on.
Yeah.
And with the retirees, it's more your social security, healthcare costs. So all these are just very wide-ranging, and I didn't find that big of a difference between voters in Bukit Batok versus those in Sembawang West.
Yeah. I feel like your situation is, your campaign is always very interesting to me because I feel like as a politician, I mean, you have like a national profile, right? Like you've been around for a long time. You're the leader of the SDP, one of the bigger opposition parties in Singapore. But at the same time, you know, you always see that with different constituencies, like local issues do matter, like, you know, the issues that are to do with that particular neighborhood or that particular, the people who live there.
Sure.
So how do you strike that balance?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be in that particular constituency and quickly get down and get a sense of what that the lay of the land, if you will.
Yeah. And I mean, sorry
Sure.
to interrupt, but like as you were doing in Bukit Batok, right? You were really tackling, or you were bringing to light a lot of things that you felt were issues with that locality. You know, you spoke about the rusted electrical outlet. I think that also you went down to like a block that had caught on fire or something like that.
Yeah, it was a very unfortunate thing. When it happened, the very next morning I went down from afar. The residents saw me and they said they were shouting, "Hey, bo chui," and there was no water. So what's going on? So I went out to the floor, and sure enough, they were telling me that hose reel fire cabinet was padlocked.
Yeah.
And I said, wait, common sense would tell you that the only reason why the hose reel cabinet is that the hose is there is for an emergency breaks out, right?
Yeah.
But the residents came and they smashed that lock in there. And then when they pulled out the hose, the water wasn't coming out. And the tragedy was that one of the occupants of the fire broke out, died from the fire.
Yeah.
And so it became a big issue at that time. And I had raised all these things. I brought it up. I said, town council must come and do all this explanation. So it got down to, it was as granular as that.
Yeah.
You get down to specific issues.
So how do you strike that balance with this campaign? You
Right,
only have a short period of time.
So then when we went on over to Sembawang West, relatively newer estate. compared to Bukit Batok. And because of that, the way that the blocks of flats are have been constructed, unlike in the older estates where you've got your parking lot in between the blocks, and because of that, you just get a little bit more space in between. But everything in Sembawang right now was just the cluster of blocks would just spring up surrounding a multi-story car park. And it just kept replicating that throughout. Sembawang West is not a big constituency. So you can imagine the amount of number of voters there, all squeezed, crammed into a small square area.
Yeah.
And it just struck me, that every time you drive in, you don't have a lot of space. Once you turn left, you just drive into a multi-story car park, and that's about it. And just struck me as very claustrophobic. And I just, and then when we went to a house visit on the first few nights, lo and behold, and a resident came up and just told us that, hey, there's this lack of space. My children can't find, everything's chock-a-block. No open green spaces where they can play around. And it really struck me, and so it resonated. And I just wanted to bring this issue up, which we have, in fact, last night at the rally.
Yeah.
That's what we talked about, and we'll be continuing to talking about this matter. It has to do with a huge problem here because of this overcrowding situation. Mental health has become a huge problem here in Singapore. I don't think I'm exaggerating because these are the words, as I said, mainstream media has used. We're in a crisis situation. The matter has come up to epidemic levels already. And when you look at the stats, it is quite frightening.
Okay.
So these are the things, issues that I want to prosecute in the remaining days of this campaign. And of course, Mr. Ong Ye Kung, Health Minister, being in that area as well, in that constituency, needs to come out and tell us why the situation has gotten so bad, and has space and overcrowding become a factor, and if it is, how we're going to deal with it going forward.
Okay. I mean, you've been involved in politics for a really long time, since 1992, is that correct? That's when you joined the SDP. In that period of time, and especially more recently, I suppose, we've seen the WP make inroads into Parliament. They've now, at the last election, they won 2 GRCs, they have 1 SMC. PSP as well, which is a brand new party. Last election, they managed to get 2 NCMP seats. Why do you think the SDP hasn't managed to make those same progress, I guess, in Parliament?
Yes, that's a really good question. I mean, in that regard, SDP had to come from much lower base.
Okay.
Because in the 1990s and well into the 20s, that was before the internet days, because of what we were doing, and we advocated for reform of the system. And by that, we mean that, look, it's not going to... You got all these issues, yes, that Singaporeans are very concerned about. Cost of living, as I said, healthcare costs, social security. But the one thing that we were not going to be able to do to address all these concerns is when you don't have that fundamental freedoms of speech, right, of assembly. And that was a huge problem. So, and you have to take yourselves back to pre-internet days, unlike right now, right? Anything you want to say, you can do these podcasts right now. We've got TikTok, to do directly communicate with Singaporeans. But at that time, you had absolutely nothing. And you're basically at the mercy of Straits Times, SPH, your TCS at that time, what we called Television Corporation Singapore.
Yeah.
But those were the only channels. And what they wanted to say of you, they could with a free hand. So at that time, freedom of speech at that time, freedom of the media, all these things were fundamental blocks, without which you can crawl all you want, right? And so because of that, the PAP we became the lightning rod, and PAP wanted to make sure that, we didn't, this whole idea of ours, political freedoms, did not resonate. So they branded us as just a Western style democracy, which Singaporeans reject. And at that time, at the height of it, you remember, I don't know if you can remember, but this talk about Asian values.
Yes, okay.
So, in that sense, and then when I wrote my book, Dare to Change, former Prime Minister was saying, Lee Hsien Loong was saying, it's all failed Western ideas. He puts it together and calls it a book. And because at that time, media was very much in their hands. We didn't get in a word edgewise.
Okay.
And so, as I said, then we started emerging from this hole that they put us in. And it was just around 2005, 2006, where, YouTube, Facebook started coming on board.
Yeah.
And that was when then we started using, if you chart our start rise coming back into the political scene, it was just around at that time too that then we started doing better. That was because we could reach out directly and explain some of the things that we were doing.
Okay.
We did. And now people looking back can begin to see the value of what we did back then, because we wanted to lay the foundation for a healthy democracy whereby there's this robust debate. And at the end of it, and Hong Lim Park is just a good example of what we did.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you feel that the SDP has reputationally taken a bigger hit because of the challenges that you guys faced in the past, especially before the days of the internet.
Sure.
Than parties such as the WP or the PSP.
I mean, it's something which, if you, as I said, if you chart where we started to rise again in terms of our popularity, for want of a better word. Yeah. It was just around that period when social media, the advent of social media. So we don't. It was just that is part of a history, and this is part of our values, which I think has given us a good anchor in terms of where we've come from. Yeah. And that really puts us in good stead, because, as I keep saying, if you don't know where you come from, you're not going to know where you're going to. Yeah. So for us, looking back was this we're very proud of our history, and but now we've got to look forward and make sure that we come back strong in terms. And I think we're making inroads. If you get on the ground, every time people come up to us, the situation is very different right now, and it'll take time. We'll need time, but I think we're coming back strong.
Do you look at all enviously at what the WP has managed to achieve?
Well, I suppose in that sense that you don't try to compare, because you run your own race. Yeah. You've got your own message. You've got your own electorate to think of, and that's got to be very different from the context of what the other parties are doing. So in that sense, you've got to just remain very disciplined and make sure you prosecute your own case the best that you can, the best that you know how. Yeah. And then you must develop your own game plan, and then be disciplined enough to stick to it.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the game plan, do you ever look at what the other parties are doing and think there are things that I have to adopt, or I mean, seeing as that they have had, at least recently, more success in winning seats?
It's not something that we've not done before, in that sense that, look, say if you're talking about just during the election period, you've got to make sure that you focus on issues that the people are very concerned about. Then you've got to figure out ways on how you can begin to get that message out in the most effective manner that you can. Yeah. So all these are issues not new in that sense, that we've been around long enough to know that during the 9 days of campaigning, it's hugely important that you be as potent as you can in terms of you're getting your message across. And don't get distracted by whatever PAP throws at you. And it'll be substantial issues that they're going to be carping on. Yeah. So in that regard, I think we've been there, done that, and to make sure that we know what we're doing, and so we don't look outside of the lanes. You've got all of 9 days, and that's not a lot of time. And if you get distracted by what PAP or WP or whatever other parties are doing, then you're going to find yourself sorry for it. and you just got to remain disciplined and make sure you've got your own game plan. Go forward with it.
Yeah. I mean, you spoke earlier about the northern strategy, or at least you mentioned it. But right now, it does seem like the east has, a bit more open, a bit softer to opposition.
Yeah.
Would you consider contesting Marine Parade, for example?
No. I mean, in that sense, that in that you've got to build up the ground, if you will, and that is important, and to make sure that wherever you are, the people, when you hear them, these are things that they will be telling you, whether it is in the east or I've been in the west as well. People will tell you what their concerns are. And in that sense, you make sure that as a party contesting in that particular area, you listen to what's going on, and then to make sure how you can reflect upon them. And for example, yesterday when you talk about my being in Sembawang West, you've got to understand what that whole situation is about. And you want to be able to bring that pride in terms of you, if you win that seat there, what you're going to do with that constituency.
Yeah.
And my point has always been to make sure that, when residents, voters, they want you as their leader, you've got to know how you're going to be able to serve them, how you're going to bring pride into that community, that constituency, and you've got to remain focused on that. And I think it resonated very well. We're going to build up on it. So it's not, it doesn't quite make sense for us to look at regions in Singapore, but that particular constituency and how you're going to appeal to voters there to want them to, for them to accept you into their community.
Yeah.
And don't forget, again, as I said, I won't go into the reasons why I think Bukit Batok was just taken off the map, right?
Yeah.
That is what it is right now. And you've got to make that pivot very quickly and make that shift. And then also be able to tell the voters now in Sembawang West why you think you do a better job there than your opponent, your PAP opponent. So that game plan needs to continue to stay in place. And all that kind of thinking about, hey, if we could consider standing in that area, and that it makes very little difference in that sense. In that regard, Singapore tends to one constituency to another, it's a lot more homogenous.
Yes, okay.
Right? We're just an island. So a lot of the policies, you just don't have that rural area in the Midwest or wherever, or in New York and that kind of thing. So in the US. So in that sense, we don't cast our eyes outside of the constituencies that we're in right now.
Can we talk a bit about your business, Orange and Teal?
Oh boy.
What's that been like, running that business?
It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah. Are you involved in it like on a day-to-day basis?
I was until then, elections, the drumbeat started, getting hotter.
Yeah.
And I had to find myself just, falling back more onto making sure that I paid more attention on the ground campaign again. And then right after, I've been doing this, so I was feeling comfortable with Bukit Batok. That's not too far from where Rochester and Orange Teal is.
Yeah.
So, weekends will still make that foray down. But because we've been doing that for 9 years, we just kept up that pace that even keeled. And then they redrew the boundaries, and everything was just thrown off whack.
Yeah.
So I had to just, cut back even more in terms of my involvement with Orange and Teal, and then, take care of the things that needed to be taken care of in Sembawang West. So in that sense, that during this intense period, I just haven't been back to Orange and Teal. That much.
Outside of campaigning, are you in the kitchen? Is Dr. Chee in the kitchen making mashed potatoes or?
You have this impression, hey, when you start running campaign, it's just sitting right there with your customers and just having a drink with them, sipping on a cocktail, and hey, you just beckon your staff to come in. get things done and so on. Doesn't
Yeah.
quite work.
That sounds
way.
like the recipe for a
I
poorly
know.
run
And so
F&B restaurant.
I know, and it's just this whole newfound respect for F&B operators and
Yeah.
owners. So it is a tough job, and every day you've got to meet customers. In politics, it's the public, right?
Yeah.
But in F&B, it's your customers, and anything that can go wrong will, the Murphy's Law. And one day it's your chiller, your freezer breaking down. Another one, this all of a sudden your staff is taken ill and you can't find a replacement. Those kinds of things. A million things that can go wrong. But it has its moments as well, I must say. And for me, it's when I fashioned Orange and Teal in terms of wanting people a home where they could really come. And that's why I've got it written right across the entrance, where the conversations even better. Food's great, service fantastic, but the conversations even better. And I just wanted a place where we could come and just not worry about looking over our shoulders. We just talk about current issues and things that we normalize otherwise would not. And my experience, like you mentioned at the outset, this place that we wanted to have, and people got scared and just chucked us out. And that cannot continue in Singapore, can it? Not if we wanted to become a society where, it's just based on intellectual jousting and debate. And that's how you're going to be able to push yourselves out into the international community, which more and more is just based on innovation, creativity, and ideas, correct? And so, the idealist in me just thought, previously all your John Steinbecks and your Karl Marxes, even J.K. Rowling's, everybody at the start at cafes and pubs, whether you're doing your writing, you're doing your debating, and so on. So I just thought, maybe if we could have a place that we could call our own as well, in terms of having this in Singapore, where there's a lot of intellectual activity going on. So for better or for worse, here we are.
Has it been a fertile recruiting ground for the SDP yet?
I don't know about it being a recruiting ground, but as far as people coming up, and you've got book launches there, and people even poetry reading, that kind of thing. So that's been very intellectually stimulating, and that's what I think it's good for Singapore.
Yeah.
So and SDP is just where we do the hard ground campaigning, getting to the average voter. But Orange and Teal, a little bit more, where people can come to and just want to do something more in depth, deeper dives, highbrow, if you will.
Yeah. You opened Orange and Teal in 2021, is that correct? 2022?
2021. Yes,
Okay.
2021.
Yeah. So it's been about 4 years. You had a second outlet which subsequently closed down. If you could go back in time and speak to Chee Soon Juan in 2021, would you still advise him to open an F&B business?
It was something that you don't look back and it's a second guess. That's always the luxury, right?
Yeah.
But nothing ventured, nothing gained. Very much a cliche there, but it's so important in life to know, and this is my message for Singaporeans. A lot of times, what we tend to do as Singaporeans now, we stick with the tried and tested.
Yeah.
But you know where that leads to, right? It becomes you have the stability, peace, and quiet, but of what? Sometimes they say you have the security of a graveyard. Yeah, everything is very, very calm and very. But if you're really talking about wanting to move ahead, and be able to take risks, that's when you need to try things. Imagine if everybody were to have that same kind of thinking in Singapore as in the rest of the world. You'd never have what you're seeing right now, right? Whether it's your Google or your Apples,
Yeah.
right? And this is hugely important. And I come back again, even in the Asian region. When you say, look at Taiwan, look at Korea, people always constantly going out and looking for new things to do. And more importantly, to be able to cultivate that entire culture, that mindset where you're always questioning, even authority. Maybe it's my own bias in terms of being in academia before, right? You never, talk to your professor as if they were gods, right? And it's this received wisdom that you're always challenging, you're always questioning.
Yeah.
And that's that whole idea that I think is so lacking here in Singapore, where it's very top down, and authority tell you to jump. Next question you ask, how high? It shouldn't be that way.
My parents run an F&B business as well, actually. Similar to you, they opened another outlet, and then they felt like they had overextended themselves, and then they had to close it.
Yeah.
And they before that they had no experience in F&B. Maybe similar to you, to you as well. And yeah, it's so tough. I don't know.
It is in that sense that, but it's something which you've got to be. You've got to adopt that philosophy, that look. You will titrate, you will move back, and you move forth. And you look at some of these giant companies, whether it's Pixar or any of those big, huge companies with TSMC and everything. That look back at the history, that have made tremendous back and forths. And you've got to keep doing that. If I'm not mistaken, James Dyson, right, came up with like 5,000 prototypes or something, I don't know, some ridiculous number, but you just kept trying. And then you fail and you fail and you fail. But that is the essence of what entrepreneurship is. But that every time you don't succeed is when there's another opportunity for you to learn and then move ahead. So I keep saying, you never fail until you stop trying.
How do you do with the customer service side of things? My dad, he's like he was an engineer his whole life, and he, can't deal with rude customers, can't deal with customers who tell him the food's bad. I'm like, dude, that's literally your job.
But I have been very fortunate in that sense. A lot of people coming into Orange and Teal are the people that know me already, right? So it's a little different in that sense. But nevertheless, I mean, it is. You don't want to just take things for granted and say, you're SDP supporter and you're eating, so I can be more substandard in my service or whatever food.
Of course not.
And people they will let you know. But it's always important to put it, taking the spirit that's given. I've had a couple of people, they weren't too sincere, they demanded this, demanded that, and that kind of thing. But this. And my staff will come back, sometimes feed it back to me, but it's something which you've got to take in your stride and say, hey, look, let's get on with things, do the best you can. But in that sense, the one thing I came across this, one example or one instance was somebody was just not too polite with the staff. And they were calling me girl, this and that, and I said, we appreciate your business here, but you've just got to maintain the sense of respect for your fellow human beings. And they may be your servers, yes, but there's no reason being impolite, being rude to them. So it's something which I think we can all do better in terms of us as service providers, right? But at the same time, if you're a customer, always maintain that sense of courtesy. Now when I go out, and I know my wife goes out and we're out there, as I said, newfound respect, right? You go out there, your service and everything. You know how tough the job is. Just make their lives happy to just, smile and when they're serving you, it makes that little bit of a difference.
For sure.
More pleasant in that sense. We don't have to be continuously this very hostile environment. I think society can become much more pleasant if we all found it in ourselves to have that respect for each other.
One of the things a lot of F&B businesses seem to struggle with is manpower, getting enough people to work. I've spoken to friends of mine who have started F&B businesses, and one of the things that they say is that actually foreign manpower helps a lot.
Sure.
But one of the things that you've spoken about is having too many foreigners.
Yeah, I mean, it goes well beyond that. I think it's this whole culture. And by culture, I don't mean that organically. It's very much a top-down thing. PAP has always wanted Singapore to be very money-driven.
Okay.
Profit-driven. And so we're very well developed in the finance industry, IT sector. But we're so lacking, right, in the cultural side of it, and even in the service, F&B, that kind of. So what happens is that then your population begins to develop this mindset. Make money, make big money in the shortest, as much money as you can in the shortest time possible, correct? So why slave in the kitchen, right? When you go and sell your whatever financial instruments. But we never really come to grips about, hey, to take pride in what we're doing. It's a skill that you, in any industry you go to, you develop that pride in there. And that comes with not driving that society and saying, hey, if you have money, you're respected. If you're not. So I keep coming back to this whole thing. And you look at, say, for example, the Japanese.
Yeah.
They take their skills, and I'm talking about in the kitchen now. You know how they are so meticulous about their training when you're preparing sushi master, that kind of thing. Almost any other field. Whether they're making, whether they call the sorts of bushido or something like that. But they take a lot of pride in what they're doing. Always. You can depend on them in terms of the quality that they put out. And money doesn't always come into play, right? And so that whole philosophy, that whole culture, as I said, of our society is to, other than you making rich and driving your big car and living in this spanking good class bungalow, other than that, you're really, please drag to society and please don't talk to me, that kind of a situation. No. Yeah. We've got to graduate into a more well-rounded society. And I come back to this point. Singaporeans then must be able to see, hey, it's not such a bad thing because the pride is where pride is. And of course, remuneration, right? Yeah. When we begin to say, hey, just lavish your big bucks on these few industry players, and then we neglect the rest of it, that is where I think that whole minimum wage is so important. I come back to this example in Finland, right? Yeah. Cleaners in Finland make about $3,500 Sing dollars a month.
Okay.
You look at that same vocation, right? You make what, 1,003, 1,005, and then you throw in your work income and so on. And it's that kind of thing. And remember how we grew up, right? You don't study hard, you become like him, you sweep the floor. It's that kind of society where we don't quite understand, the value of the work.
Yeah.
And we just say, you look at him, he's just not sitting in front of his desk. So that blue-collar work, not good, that kind of thing. Yeah. But when you travel, when you go to to Australia, for example, you see your gardeners. Your white folks are doing it, right?
Yeah.
Go to in Europe, same thing, and you look at people constructing roads, building your buildings. You don't see any Bangladeshis or Sri Lankans over there. That kind. So it's that pride of sense of work, but at the same time, if you pay your people well, productivity comes up. People begin to be very, very proud of what they're doing, and that skill set comes in. That makes for a well-rounded society.
Honestly, I agree with you that I would love to see our cleaners, our auntie cleaners getting paid, the kind of figures that you were mentioning, $3,000 and $4,000 a month. But the challenge, I think, will be to get people to accept that things will have to cost more if that's the case, right?
Well, you think about it, right? That's the we've been fed that line, right? You want all these wages to go up, sure, you got to pay more. Well, is that true? Is that really true? Or have we become a very rent-seeking economy, rentier economy? Meaning that everything we've done is just very much geared towards where we manipulate or at least make policy where to benefit the capital class.
Okay.
And not really looking at what skills are important, right? And I keep saying, whatever you do right now, having run a business too, you begin to find, hey, rent is a huge, huge problem.
Okay.
And then when you talk about rent, 90% of land controlled by the government. Government is the biggest landlord, developer, and a landowner, correct? When you take all this into consideration, you begin to ask why. Yeah. Are we making the best use of our land so that your wealth is accumulated to a certain class? What about these are things that we can do if we lower land price?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you lower land price, businesses feel, hey, I don't have to pay so much in terms of whether it's just rent or don't forget your suppliers. They've got to pay their rent too.
Yeah.
So everything is this multiplier effect. And by the time the food reaches your table, it has to cost that much more. So what we're saying is any business, lower rent, and that amount, that savings there can allow businesses to pay the workers more. But it doesn't have to be that situation where you want something, higher wages, you've got to pay more.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. Do you think that running a business has changed your perspective on life, on politics at all?
It has. In fact, it just made me more convinced of what we've been saying before.
Okay.
It just cannot be, as I said, wealth accrued to your top, however many percent, and everybody else just has to struggle along. So that in that sense, all right, I keep saying this point, if you want to do business, go out, knock yourselves out,
Okay.
right? But the government's philosophy must be you take care of society, right? Businesses don't want, rich don't want you to be, in the space all the time.
Yeah.
Get out, let us do our own stuff. So what the how idea of government service or public service is to take care of your strata, lower strata of your society.
Yeah.
But right now, everything is just in Singapore is just so mixed up. You have the business, your government into business, and that is a very, very unhealthy situation to be in. That whole nexus between government and private sector, you don't know which is which right now.
Yeah.
And that leads to a very, very unhealthy situation where you're never quite sure what is public service and what is for profit. And the government now begins to say everything it's service, it's calculated in dollars and cents. Public spirit is never, it's not quite there. So you have this situation, ministers demanding, the $1 million salaries. Otherwise, I don't want to work anymore. You may hear that you in the private sector, but in the public sector, there's something called public spiritedness, isn't it? Right.
So you never, when you started Orange and Teal a few years in, you were never like, oh, I love this. I think I found my calling in life. Maybe I'll leave politics aside.
Maybe for the first month. But after that. But
once reality sets in.
Yeah. And it is, in that sense, you begin to realize, how difficult things can get. And then you get a new sense of appreciation for how, other businesses and your staff as well.
Yeah.
And reality is that I've never been more convinced of our message right now.
Yeah.
Politically, right? And things have got to change in Singapore now.
Okay, Dr. Chee, I'm curious to know, do you feel like you've evolved as a politician over the years? How many elections have you contested now?
I forget, but in between, there were a couple of elections that I couldn't contest in because of my bankruptcy. To your question, you evolve as a person.
Yeah.
And it's very important that sometimes you just remain true to yourself in terms of what you want to do. And in that sense, I think it's, with you through life, if you will, you just live longer, you experience more. And it's always important to take into your experience and see how you can become a better person as you move along. Otherwise, why be a human being at all, right? Why have the faculty of reasoning? And so it's just, I just think that as, life throws you a lot of curves, you take it and you make sure that how you begin to adjust and adapt to the changing world around you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I mean, My first memory, I first became aware of who you were when I was in university. I think it was around 2015, right? My impression of you was like, oh, this is like kind of cool, rebellious dude. I think at the time there was like a documentary that was out about you, and then there was a video I remember seeing of your daughters playing guitar. Set against like old footage of you, playing with them as kids and things like that.
Yeah.
But then, like a certain generation, older generation will have a different impression of who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Do you think you've like mellowed out?
I don't know. I mean, with age, you certainly find yourself slowing down in that sense. I mean, it's just as a physical human being.
Yeah.
You find yourself, slowing down the things that you do. But in terms of what you believe in, I continue to. What I wrote when I first entered politics and dared to change, my first book, and I look back at it, I just haven't found. Say, hey, I've come to see that my political views then were not quite legitimate. I haven't. Found that to be the case. If anything, I've just found that now the PAP has moved towards our end.
Yeah.
And one good example would be in education. And that was a central plank when I started off in politics because of my own training and my own experience when I was teaching at NUS.
Yep. You're referring to streaming.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm talking about in education. And at that time, my whole research was in brain development and so on. And I took an interest in terms of how, the brain developed its, in the formative years. And so that the big issue about streaming and so on came to me as something very significant. And at that time, I had this running battle with the Ministry of Education, but it was all Straits Times Forum, right? And I had made this point about streaming, just, it labeled children, and there was stigmatization and self-fulfilling prophecy, and that the experiments were just showing over and over again, children live to the labels that you placed upon them, you see. And I said, you're going to have, at that time, was something called monolingual, normal, and express. And you just tell a child, hey, you're monolingual. And I'm just saying, and a kid was coming out from school, primary 4, primary 6.
Yeah.
I just found that to be very unproductive. So we made that whole huge issue of that. But after 30 years, and I find right now that just last year, Forward Singapore and that, and before that, Ong Ye Kung, when he was Minister of Education, Indrani Raja came out, all used the words, the stigmatization, labeling, and words that we've used 30 years ago, and then finally came out to say, we will abolish streaming. And it's just not only that, the rest of them, healthcare, when it comes, and then CPF, all these issues, we're beginning to find that, they're moving towards our side. And one of the things that we called for was unemployment insurance and so on. So you find that the needle moving so it's been immensely gratifying to note that what you said then still holds true today.
Yeah.
And, they're gravitating towards our end. So, to answer your question, no, in terms of my own personal evolution, I just don't see, in my thinking anyway, that needle hasn't moved that much.
Yeah. Do you ever look back at things that you did previously? I mean, you've been described as quite radical in the past. Do you ever look back at it and regret or cringe?
No, I don't think in that sense that, when you look back, there was a time and place where you were in. But of course, when at different points in your life, you've always come to a situation where you made a certain decision to either act or think in a certain way.
Yeah.
But then at another point, then you begin to, then another crossroads fork again. You say you make another decision. So as you go along, you don't look back. You look at where your next decision point is going to be, and then from that you take the course, and you hope that then that a whole series of better decisions that you made, you begin to become a better person in the end. But I think it's really difficult to always wanting to look back and say, hey, look, I shouldn't have done this at that time. But at that point, you made the best decision given to you, and see how you've evolved, how you can do better as you go along.
Yeah.
But these are the things, as I said, where you always strive to do better, to become a better person. And that, I think, makes that difference in terms of... I've seen also people who just continue to remain where they are 10, 15, 20 years ago. And sometimes if you don't learn in terms of from your own experience, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to get very
Do you have any regrets over the last 33 years, 33 odd years of politics?
If you wanted to have this regret, then you've got to be asking, should I have entered politics in the first place?
Yeah.
Should I have just continued with academia? By now, I would probably either retired already, if not made full professor, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
So you in that sense, if you're talking about regrets, no, you take it as it comes.
Okay.
As I said, your own life's experience informs you of how you should be moving forward. But you do what you can, given circumstances around you prevailing. You just make sure you make the best of it, and know that you're going to continue to you continue to stumble, right? But you never stop learning and try to do better as you go along.
Yeah. Looking back at it now, I mean, I don't think there's any way you would have known the amount of sacrifices that you would have had to make. And I mean, people can say what they want about you, disagree with your ideas, but I think, it's fair to say that you have not had the easiest of times over the last 33 years.
Yeah, and again, it really depends on what your yardstick is.
Yeah.
If you're looking to calculate everything in dollars and cents, then of course it really didn't make sense, right? I mean, I could have gone on and made that drawn that kind of salary, but in that sense, if you look at it in terms of what you've brought to society, the people that you've reached out to, and managed to persuade to say, hey, look, society shouldn't be this, it should be that kind of thing. Then, of course, it's been a lot more, as I said, gratifying in that sense to know that if so many people have come up to me and said, thank you, didn't quite see it that way, and it's important to be able to deploy your own skills in terms of trying to reach out to people in that sense. So I don't look back and say the sacrifices that were made, and so it's just continually looking forward to say, hey, look, how many more minds can we change? How many more hearts can we touch? And let's just go on from there. And then when you at the end of your road, you look back and you want to be able to say, look, you gave of your best, and hopefully things you left behind a society that will be better. And then you stand on the shoulders of others that come before you, and you wanted to at least be able to make that contribution so the people that come after you can then begin to work on what you've contributed as well. Yeah. And then, society evolves from there.
Did you think that you would be doing this 33 years later when you were first approached? You first joined the party in 1992.
You're all wide-eyed, bushy-tailed at that time, right? You just come in and you say, hey, you can change the world, this and that. Yeah. But to be fair, also, I mean...
You thought you'd be Prime Minister by now.
Yeah. And, well, I don't know if you go that far. But at that time, you kind of... I was under no illusion. This was going to be an easy task. Yeah. You're talking about those days when Lee Kuan Yew was at its most powerful, was in its zenith. And everybody says, hey, you're going to get sacked and stuff like that. That, right? And sure enough, people were taking bets and say how long I would last after I announced my candidacy in 1992. But in that regard, I think it's you knew that there was something you needed to do, okay, and that came from that period when I was also having gone through when I was still in my late teens and early 20s, that whole
the graduate mother
scheme. That just really bothered me. And then I went away and came back and things hadn't changed. And I said, rather than letting it gnaw away at you, do something about it. And then that whole, it became very compelling, and I just couldn't not answer it. So for better or for worse, I got into the SDP. And things were very rough, very rough. But at the same time, if you've told yourself that, look, you've got to stay the course because you knew when you got in, before you got in, things were going to be rough. And now that when you're in it, you just cannot bail. And this is where I think it's so important that whole perseverance, resilience, that's got to play a bigger part in our lives.
Did you ever come close to walking away?
Oh, I mean, there were just certainly some periods where you did question, are we going anywhere? Are we getting anywhere?
Yeah.
But then you sit down, you take stock of the situation. And the one thing that I must say, reading. I keep saying reading. It's not just fanciful word that to make yourself sound, all self-important and so. But it was through reading that just became your counselor, your coach, your friend, and something that you could then begin to say, hey, look, there have been very many instances that came before you did, that people were going through all these trials and these difficult times, but then emerged. But then emerged. I don't want to use the word victorious, but actually managed to achieve what they set out to do.
Yeah.
But it took perseverance, it took patience, it took time. And so if you, with that knowledge in there, then it equips you to say, hey, look, I'm not the first one to go through this. And so you learn from others as well. So in that sense, with that thing, that mindset, it helps you just to go on that little bit more.
Yeah. It's very interesting to me to contrast your entry into politics with someone like your colleague, Paul. He came in relatively later in his life when he was already very successful. Sure. Yours was at the very start. I guess you were in your 30s in academia. I think you could have a much more comfortable life today if you had continued that path.
Yeah. But then you see, when I compare, say, myself then with somebody like, for example, J.B. Jeyaretnam.
Yes, okay.
Right? She struggled through that time. And I said his nemesis was at that time with Lee Kuan Yew.
Yeah.
But then, I came at a later time, right? And he passed away right at the time when social media was just starting to come on. So in that sense, you don't compare.
Yeah. Okay.
You're born at that time. Well, what can you do about it, right? It's this era that you're in. You do what you can, and then you contribute. And that's why I keep saying, those who come before you, you stand on their shoulders, and then you push. And then one day you hope that it crosses that threshold, and society benefits from that. But what can you do? You're not in the right place. You don't reap the benefits. But it doesn't mean that your contribution was not equally important, if not more so. So in that regard, you're killer. You're being philosophical about it, but it is important to have that mindset.
Yeah. How long more do you think you have the stamina to contest?
Oh, right now you're asking me the fourth day of campaigning. You're just thinking tomorrow must all end already. But, in that, again, you cast your mind. Further and look at it. As long as you can contribute, I know it's very much of a cliche, but I've said it before, it really is your neural functioning.
Okay.
If you can still contribute, you may not be able to physically, run that marathon.
Yeah.
But you can, with your faculty still in place, be able to, use your words, your writing, your thoughts to continue to influence and shape society, and that is a contribution.
How's your I mean, you used to run like triathlons and things like that, right?
I mean, those were the good old days that your legs could still carry you, but now
Not doing much of that anymore.
yeah, I'm still trying to. Although I must say that the COVID did a lot to
Okay.
to cut everything short. And then after to restart again is very difficult because some of the events everybody had to cancel it.
Yeah.
So it was very disruptive at that point.
Yeah.
But they're slowly coming back on again.
So are you still? You're still not. You're not doing any of these.
I haven't had the
things
time to
anymore.
go back there and start to doing. Although I was just getting to the momentum, but then.
Do you still exercise regularly?
I try to. I try to. That is another component of it which really makes it important too.
Yeah.
I used to go down and swim a lot, but then the whole Toa Payoh sports complex is just being redeveloped right now, and so that it's very disruptive.
Yeah. I mean, speaking about like, I asked you the question just before this about retire. Like, if you would, how long more do you have left? Do you not ever think, fantasize, I suppose, about a life outside of the spotlight where you can just spend with your kids, with your wife, You don't have to be this, I guess, somewhat polarizing figure in Singaporean society.
Yeah. I suppose the time will come when, and you will know it now, when you want to be able to do something else other than what I'm presently doing.
Yeah.
But then, again, there's no point in trying to figure out when you're going to do it and then engineer it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You will know when it comes, whether it's mentally or it's physically. And then when it does come, you make that decision and then you move on in life.
Okay.
But when it's going to happen precisely, I can't tell you. I mean, you look at some people, they call it a day in their 60s, but then, some people, your Mandelas, your Winston Churchills, your Lee Kuan Yew, they'll continue on. So, as I said, different individuals, you have your own different tunes, and when it comes, you'll know when your song is up.
Okay. Looking back at, let's drop a pin right now, right? Do you think you have been a successful politician up until this point?
No.
Okay.
I think, and I use the word politician in a very parochial sense. If you're talking about somebody who just out there to get votes, to do whatever, say whatever to get votes, right? Then no.
Okay.
I'm not that successful politician. But if you're talking about somebody who's longer, who's wider vision, if you will, is just to change minds, not just change votes, change minds, and change society in that sense, then that's a very different, kind of perspective altogether.
Yeah.
So in that sense, and I guess it said, the last chapter in Singapore in politics has not been written yet. In fact, it's just beginning. People are just beginning to realize how important it is to have a democracy, right? To have free and fair elections. Man, it's going on right now. And this is something which I talked about, championed since day one when I joined the SDP. In that regard, I think it's, that contribution. History will tell, history will judge.
So if it all ended today, do you think you'd be satisfied with how things have gone so far?
Well, I suppose, if say I walk out right now and the lightning, not the thing, but
touch wood, not
but
a different kind of lightning.
A different kind of lightning, but it hits you and you drop dead, right? In that sense, that you again, I come back to this point that you have made your contribution. Be satisfied, be gratified that you've done your part, right? And then you leave it to others to pick up the baton and then run some more. I have absolutely no doubt that this whole process will carry on, and one day Singapore will join the ranks of nations that are of peoples that are free and wanting to say, hey, look, we want to chart our destiny. We don't want to keep listening to a small ruling clique that keeps telling us where to go. Even if we make mistakes, we want to make our own mistakes. But as a people, let us make that decision, let us make that choice, and then fulfill our own destiny.
I have one last question before we head to our the questions submitted by the audience. I mean, this Help Desk is an advice show. If you had to go back in time and give advice to 1992 version of Chee Soon Juan, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh my gosh, these are all the philosophical questions that I think one thing that I would have liked to do was, I don't know, it's something which, going back and really looking at examining what happened in between, it's not that I didn't give it a lot of thought. I had wanted to take part in 91 general elections, but at that time we said, and at that time we weren't married yet. So I was talking to May about our situation, said, hey, look, we're not married yet. Let's wait for, after we were more settled. And so we did. So I skipped 1991 elections. Point I'm trying to make is that I gave it a lot of thought. And after scrutinizing everything else taken, I just thought that I wanted to make that leap into the opposition. So if you're referring to that political decision I made, I wouldn't try to second guess. Say, hey, maybe I shouldn't have come in that early stage. I think I still would have. I still would have.
Okay, we've got a question from a member of our audience. Here, I'll pass that to you.
Sure.
Give you a second to digest that. Oops. But before we get into it, if you are watching this at home right now or wherever you are, if you have some sort of life decision that weighs heavy on your chest, if it's a big one or even a small trivial one, you can write into us at the link that's on your screen right now. You can find that same link in our show description. And who knows, you might get someone with as crazy life experience as Dr. Chee to answer your question. Okay, Dr. Chee, I've given you a little bit to read over the question. Would you mind reading it for our audience?
Oh, goodness. I'm just, with this Lao Hua, is this, you want me to read out the whole, the question, huh?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
There's an ex I cannot get over. Oh my gosh. Dear Abby, kind of, okay, there's an ex that I cannot get over and still in contact with. We've been friends for 9 years, including 3 years as a couple. We enjoy each other's company, and he doesn't plan to get married in the moment, and I'm unsure if his stance will change years later. Is it red flaggish? Did I get that right?
Yeah, red flaggish.
I don't know what that means. Was it toxic? Toxic of us if we continue this situationship, since I still have feelings for him and I can't see myself falling for other guys. Or should I force myself to move on and be with another guy? All right. P.S. He became an ex because our long-term goals didn't quite what was it?
Align back then.
Back then, I wanted to get married while I was young, but he didn't. Currently, my desire to marry isn't as strong anymore.
Yeah, that was from viewer
Elin,
Courtney.
I think this is for you. May, would you like to?
What?
I'm almost afraid to get in trouble with this.
What advice would you give to Courtney? I mean, you have daughters as well. You have 2 daughters. Do they ever come to you for relationship advice?
No. And I wish they would. But no, really, it's again, my bias is because I've got 2 daughters.
Yeah.
So, I'd say for all it's worth, as a father speaking, move on. You'll find, people in life, future that you look back, you say, hey, what was I thinking then, right? But there are other people in your lives that you in the moment, you feel just very drawn to him and wanting to be in that relationship again. But again, you know, it's not a rejection in that sense. It's perhaps maybe you're unable to come together for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It will happen to Courtney. It will happen, you know, but just continue to believe in self. And you know, better things will happen.
Do you believe in soulmates?
Yes, I do. Yes,
Okay.
I do. Because I've got one with me right now. And
Yeah.
it's been very fortunate. I don't know if it happens to everybody. But you know it when it happens to you.
Okay. So, judging from this question, if you had to guess, do you think this ex is Courtney's soulmate? If you had to guess.
Oh my gosh! If it does happen, you know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't try, but you know, if you've reached out to him, and if he reciprocates, then I suppose you know you find it. But that's not the end. You're not going to live happily ever after that, correct?
Yeah,
It's got
you gotta
this
work through
constant
things.
process of working at it. You're going to have doubts. You're going to have periods where it's going to be so down, so bitter. But you know that's life, and it's not just in relationships. Right? Almost anything that you do, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's at work or whether you find your own, you know, calling in life or not, you'll have your ups and downs. But you work at it. You always work at it. And if Courtney, if you feel that this is one person that you really, really want to get back together with, then by all means, give it a try. But just also be, you know, very in that sense that know that things are not going to be the end. And if you don't find yourself in the relationship with him, move on.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah. I think I want to take a moment just quickly because you didn't know what red flag was. Are you familiar with that term?
I know what red flag is, but when you say red flag, I'm not sure the same
yeah.
thing as I read it now. That you know they're in trouble, right? As in a relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Situationship. Are you familiar with that one?
No, I know what situation. But that's why I kind of hesitated for a moment whether that's situationship.
Yeah, that's like you know, like in the old days in Facebook, you could put your relationship status, and you know there was one relationship status that was it's complicated.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's
Okay.
like a situationship.
Okay.
That's how I explain it to slightly
okay,
older people,
okay,
I think.
Okay.
Okay, there you go, Courtney. I think you have Secretary General of the SDP. He says you should move on. I think you should move on too, to be honest. This does not sound like a...
But take it with a huge pinch of salt, huh? What I just...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Chee, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for humoring that last question as well. I really appreciated the conversation. I wish you all the best in your campaign over the next couple of days.
Thanks for having me. It's
Yeah.
been really fun.
Okay, and thank you to Audio-Technica for powering the audio for this podcast. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye.